we've talked about this issue of public consumption a lot. It's a very contentious issue in Colorado, and right now there are some legalization activists out there pushing forward, you know, a proposed initiative that would allow some sort of social use in commercial businesses, art galleries, bars, restaurants, movie theaters. You know, because right now the only place in the city and county of Denver that you can legally consume is basically private residences, and you need the permission of the owner of that home to even do it there. And so I want both of your opinions on this subject. Katherine, let's bring you back in. What do you think of it?
So I will say that when I first heard it, even being in the marijuana business myself, there was a moment of like, simply because I was a big fan when we took tobacco out of all the bars, right? And I didn't want to be around the smoke. So when I first heard consumption in public, I got nervous about it. And hearing that that's, yes, but in hearing that that's not where this is going, here's the reality of it. It's happening anyway. It's happening anyway. People are sneaking out to go into the back alleys. They're running to their cars. People are consuming in public anyway. So rather than hide, let's just give them an outlet of a place to do it. And who cares? I mean, honestly, who cares? What does it affect you if I consume marijuana, especially if I'm vaporizing or I'm eating an edible, that it doesn't affect you in any way other than now I might be a little higher than I was when we started this conversation.
Right.
But past that, why do you care?
I had a conversation with a colleague the other day, and it was a colleague who I interview, and we both were kind of in off-the-record mode, and I did ask him, I was like, do you think anything would actually happen if this was implemented? I mean, before January 1st, we weren't sure what that was going to look like, and after the fact, it was like, oh, life is normal. Yeah. So if this passes in November, would Denver look very different? Pat, what do you think?
Actually, I think Katherine's right. It's already happening. And the policy, the laws need to catch up with what's happening in the real world. You know, it's unfortunate, but for political reasons, I believe, this was left out of Amendment 64.
Sure.
I mean, it was purposely left, you know, on the table as something they didn't want to tackle. They didn't want this issue to drag down the passage of legalization because this issue's tougher. And now here it is. I think it needs to be dealt with. And I believe that local communities should decide. I don't think we should have a state law that mandates it one size fits all for all of the state. I think the local authorities that can decide whether or not to have, you know, sales and businesses and licenses in their jurisdiction should also decide what they want to do around public consumption. But something needs to be done, because going out and smoking in your car is not the answer. That's illegal.
Yep.
I actually think when you talk about marijuana tourism, and a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but it's occurring, and I think the situation for those tourists is particularly bad, and I think we're really driving them towards edibles. And I think some of the things we've seen with people over consuming edibles is because they didn't have a place to smoke, and so it was the thing they wanted to do. And I think our policy is producing some unintended consequences, and we need to deal with this.
Yeah, pushing people toward edibles, and they are, I mean, like it or not, just more unpredictable, more difficult to acclimate and to understand exactly where your high is at that moment, because it might be 30 minutes, it might be 90 minutes. You know, as this subject relates to the idea of cannabis-only clubs, do you guys have a preference? Would you prefer it was like cannabis-only places without alcohol? Maybe they have a license to serve food, or this more open-ended proposition. Do you guys have an opinion on which one is better than the other?
I very strongly believe that this is the appropriate approach. I believe that marijuana should be mainstream at this point, and I don't think there's any reason to segregate marijuana consumers to their own little hole, and you guys are second-class citizens and don't come out and mingle with the real world. I think assuming, again, that my consumption isn't affecting you in any way, I should be able to consume in any public location where the proprietor of that location feels that it's acceptable.
I agree. I mean, I think it should be up to the business. If that's a market they want to reach out to and serve, that's a business decision. And why should government and our policies interfere in someone's business decision? And so, you know, the way this is structured, I think it would still allow cannabis-only clubs, if that's what someone wanted to do.
Sure.
As a for-profit business that's restricted to, you know, no one under 21 and all the other restrictions that are built in. Let people decide. You know, some people may want to go to bars where there's alcohol. Some people may want to be away from that situation.
And that's an important part of this equation to mention and make sure that voters understand, because I think a lot of people read the headline, bars, restaurants, and they think, great, I can't go out and have a meal now unless without somebody blowing pot smoke in my face. And, you know, it would allow vaporization edibles indoors and pot smoking outdoors 25 feet away from public spaces like sidewalks. And also the ultimate control would sit, at least in Denver, the way this is proposed, would sit in the business owner's hands. So if you own a bar, you don't want to allow that, you don't have to. If you own a gallery, you want to allow it sometimes, you could. Other times, I don't know if that's an issue, but the power is in the business owner's pocket, which I think is important. So
I think it's also important because the more restrictive you make it, the harder you make it on the business owners to get into the business. So I think it's important for small businesses to be able to contribute and be a part of this economy if they want to. And if you make it super restrictive, it makes it extra difficult for a small business. And within the marijuana world, I mean, the money that I spend on lawyers, I don't even want to, you know, when I write that check, I cry a little every day. But just because the regulations are so strict and they're so specific and they're so intricate, it's not like any other small business where you start and you just kind of figure it out as you go. With marijuana, it's very specific and it's very detailed, and you have to know exactly what you're doing. I want other small businesses to be able to be a part of the marijuana economy if they so choose. And I think less restrictions make that more accessible.
And we learned hundreds of, you know, thousands of lessons from the war on drugs. And one of them is when you tell people they can't do something, you know, and here we have legal marijuana, but you can't smoke it anywhere outside of a private residence. That's going to create problems. And I've told the story before, I think even on the show, but you know, walking by the Four Seasons in Denver. It's a 2 or 3 year old beautiful hotel downtown, and there's a dude in the alley, you know, with his vape pen, and clearly, you know, just out of a business meeting. He's dressed sharp like Pat. He's got a suit on, and I just like looked at him and walked by, and he just kind of gave me an awkward wave and said, "Hey, I'm not trying to disrespect your local laws. I just have no idea where I'm supposed to do this. They sold it to me. I can't do it in the hotel. They told me I can't." He's like, "I don't think I'm supposed to be out here." So it's interesting, and I cannot wait to see where we go on this subject.